forsaken booth. The truth is you sadly mistaken. Proof I'm better than.
Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. This is your host, MagMongoSlade. So there has always been this concept. It's been floating around the internet for the last several years about WWE not wanting anybody to become bigger than the brand. And like many people, I actually agree with this too. And it makes perfect sense when you consider it. A guy like The Rock, a guy like Steve Austin, or whatever, they leave and a chunk of fans go away along with them. It makes perfect sense why WWE would not want anybody to become, quote, bigger than the brand. But then I realized, and I actually did some digging, and I came to the conclusion that this is just one big old lie. Like many narratives that goes on with the dirt sheets, this is not true. So where do I get this concept from? Well, I was reading a little bit of Jesse Ventura's book, Jesse the Bodyventura, and I was reading a piece of his book, and it says, quote, "The standard was that if a wrestler wanted to have an agent, he'd get fired. But my popularity gave me leverage. I remember one time I said to Vince, that's the secret to becoming a megastar, isn't it? To go out and become famous at something else, and then come back." Vince smiled at me and said, "You're learning, aren't you?" This was before Jesse the Body Ventura went away to do movies. Now, even though Vince did not want him to do Predator and Running Man and all these other movies, this is what gave Jesse the Body Ventura not only leverage over Vince when it came time to pay him more money, when he wanted him to come back and do a color commentary and a couple of other things that he wanted him to do, but it also spread Jesse Ventura's name, and it actually made it easier for him to transition away from wrestling. So I said to myself, you know what? That makes a little bit of sense. That's a pretty good argument. But that's not all. That's not going to be enough to convince people. So then I went and I found an article that quotes The Rock. But The Rock says, and I quote, "If I could leave and become successful outside the world of professional wrestling, and then I could come back, this time as a global entity, this time I could bring a greater value to the company of WWE." And I said to myself, you know what? That is the key. It's not that WWE doesn't want people to become bigger than the brand. It's that WWE wants you to become bigger than the brand so that you'll be a bigger star when you come back. You can go out and make more fans, and then you are a bigger star when you come back. Now, the reason why I came up to this, and it took a while for me to really sit down and consider it, is that WWE always uses celebrities. And sometimes, most of the time, these celebrities have absolutely no background in pro wrestling. We already know from the first WrestleMania, you had Muhammad Ali, you had Liberace, you had Mr. T. These people who came from outside the business that Vince had to pay a ton of money to, because basically he was greasing palms, trying to build relationships. How different would that be if the person whose palms you're greasing is actually a former wrestler? And then I sat down and I thought about it, and I said, how many former wrestlers have really left wrestling and then made a huge comeback, and sometimes came back bigger than when they left? And I say, well, look at what Vince has done. Look at all of the wrestlers who have gone off to do movies or something else, TV shows. And how many of them have actually come back as bigger stars? Roddy Piper, Hulk Hogan, John Cena, The Rock, Batista. They all came back. So why wouldn't Vince want them to go out and become bigger stars? Of course he would want them to go out and become bigger stars. Why did he spend all that money on WWE studios if he did not want wrestlers to become bigger stars? Why would he say he doesn't want you to become bigger than the brand? He would not want you to become bigger than the brand. He wouldn't care because the brand is eternal. I mean, it's one of those things that I really had to think about. It's one of those things I really had to consider. Because outside of, paying you a lot of money, which he probably had to do for, to get Batista to perform at WrestleMania, to get The Rock to show up. He probably had to cut the fat checks, sure. But if it's worth it, it's worth it. I mean, Batista was Drax in Guardians of the Galaxy. Sure, he didn't completely, support that whole thing, just like he didn't completely support Mercedes Veronado, aka Sasha Banks, doing the whole Mandalorian thing. Sometimes there are agents and they cut those deals without WWE, and because WWE gets paid to promote things, why should they promote things for free? Even if it is for a talent that they have, why would, Disney, who owns Star Wars and Marvel, get free publicity from WWE just because wrestlers are in their movies? Once a deal was kind of put together, however, WWE doesn't have a problem promoting a wrestler's movie. Just like when they had Batista, they did the whole zombie thing. Batista himself did not appear, even though his voice appeared at the cold open of Extreme Rules, I believe it was. But Batista himself didn't show up. But Batista's movie was well integrated into that movie, into the WWE film, which led to a crossing of the brands. They did it again with The Rock and Red Notice. The Rock didn't actually appear, but WWE being involved with The Rock led to a great deal of success. And I said to myself, the dirt sheets are obviously wrong. They don't want wrestlers to become bigger than the brand. Sure, it always sucks when, would it be great if you had The Rock every week? No, because then The Rock will become mundane. You'll see The Rock everywhere. Then seeing him in wrestling wouldn't be that big of a deal. But if it was every once in a while thing, he could be a super mega special attraction. A special attraction used to be like Andre the Giant or The Undertaker. 2 or 3 times a year. Or Bill Goldberg. A couple of times a year. Not that often. Are you going to be in the lucky SummerSlam or WrestleMania crowd or Saudi Arabian crowd of when these guys are finally going to show up? Instead of, this guy's going to make the loop in South Dakota. No, he's not coming to South Dakota. All right? Sure. The same thing with The Rock. Same thing with, a guy like Batista or something like that. Yes, WWE wants you to go out and become a big star. They want you to go out there. And then here's another thing that you need to consider. Just say, Mongo, you're full of shit. It's not true. They don't want you to become bigger than the brand. Then understand, why do they use it to recruit? It's one of the number one WWE recruiting things. Hey, look at all of the superstars we've made. Not only are they TV stars, as in they're on television every single week, like every other TV star, but we can get you into movies. And look at The Rock. Look at John Cena. Look at Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan was in tons of movies. Roddy Piper was in tons of movies. Jesse the Bodyventura was in tons of movies. We can get you in movies. This is a huge recruitment campaign that WWE can roll out to any prospective talent that says we can sell tons of merchandise. Look at all the toys we can sell. Look at all the video games you can be on. And not just the 2K games. I'm talking about all the mobile games and all the other stuff that they've been able to do. Why wouldn't they want you to be a part of that or to add to that? Why wouldn't they? Wouldn't it behoove them to have somebody out there who is a bigger star who you can then put into video games? Imagine, for instance, there was somebody like sure, The Rock and Steve Austin, those 2 guys are great, but what if it was another guy, who was in, the face of some Marvel movie or something like that? You could put him on the cover of your video game. That's great for everybody. It's definitely great for the guys like the Dolph Zigglers and the Chad Gables and those guys, because they get more money because there's going to be more games sold. Just like, they probably loved the DVD royalties that came from, having the legends on a DVD. It's smart business. Why wouldn't they want to do that? Because you won't be on Raw every week? Those deals are locked up for years at a time. They're not too concerned about that. But they are concerned, hey, we got 100,000 people in this building. Maybe we can get a guy for WrestleMania. Maybe we can get this guy for SummerSlam. Maybe, we're going to get $50 million to do a show in Saudi Arabia. Maybe we can get a guy to do that. And not every time. Not even most times. Because there are certain people who have never been to Saudi Arabia who are big stars. But if you think WWE doesn't want you to be a super crossover star, that sounds ridiculous. Of course they do. Of course they do. what we are looking at here is that there aren't a lot of people who are. There aren't a lot of people who have that ability, who have the ability to be a big crossover star. Those that do, they have to take the risk. And this is the difference. I think a lot of wrestlers who grew up wrestling fans and they always wanted to be a wrestler, they never really wanted to do anything else. This is the thing they don't understand. So, in the excerpt that I read to you from Jesse Ventura's book, what he says is that Vince McMahon told him flat out he did not want Jesse Ventura to do Predator because Jesse Ventura had done it on his own. He didn't do it through Vince. And he was like, no, we're not doing that. Jesse Ventura said, look, wrestling will always be here. I ain't never going to get another opportunity to do a movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I'm going to run off and do this thing. I get back to you when I get back to you. And Vince said, well, you're fired. And Jesse Ventura was like, whatever. I'm going to go do this movie. And then we're going to talk about it after this movie. And he tells a story about how Vince was, he heard the movie was going so well. This was actually the movie was being shot, by the way. He sent photographers and everything down to Mexico to create a chronology of the movie and Jesse Ventura's romp through Hollywood. And Jesse Ventura was like, no, absolutely not. I'll see you when I get back. This is almost the exact same situation as when Hulk Hogan was offered the spot in Rocky, right? And Jesse and Vince Sr. said, no, you can't do it. Nah, we don't want you doing that. And Hulk Hogan was like, guess what? I'm doing it. And Vince Sr. fired him. And then Hulk Hogan went to the AWA and became a superstar. It happens. Sometimes you have to take that leap of faith. Sometimes they don't believe in you. They like you as a wrestler. They like you as a personality, but they don't really believe that you have that ability. And you have to go out there and show them. And that's why when I saw Mercedes Veronado and not Sasha Banks for The Mandalorian, I said, oh, well, she went and did her own thing. Got to give her credit for that. And guess what happened? It worked out, and WWE came along like, hey, look, everybody, Sasha Banks was on Star Wars. It was after the fact. Just like Batista, when he went out and did his own thing, they were kind of like, I don't know if that's going to work out. We'll see. We'll see. And then it turned out great, and everybody was like, hey, look, former WWE World Champion Dave Batista was in the Marvel movie. That's how you control these. You control your own narrative, to borrow from EC3. You can control your own narrative. That's when you truly become a partner in these companies. And Sasha Banks, when I said this, Sasha Banks was a diva. I did a video about this. And she talked about how she eats steak just like Vince. She likes steaks just like Vince. And she likes big money just like he does. It seems that she had took the right idea. Business. She is going to take her face, name, brand, whatever, and take it as far as she can. Which is the exact thing you're supposed to do. Even if WWE doesn't want you to do that. It's the right thing to do. Because ultimately, the more you do outside, the more valuable you are inside. And everybody knows it. It's not something that the fans don't know. It's not something that the wrestlers don't know. It's just some of them don't have the faith in themselves to do it. And so therefore you hear all this stuff like Vince doesn't want anybody to become bigger than the brand. Then why does he constantly have these guys doing commercials? Why does he constantly have these people doing movies? Why does he constantly bring in Floyd Mayweather and Cyndi Lauper and Bad Bunny? Of course he wants people who are bigger than the brand because he gets the rub from them. Of course he wants to have people who can help build the brand bigger because WWE benefits tremendously from partnerships with other big companies. And the bigger, the better for WWE. Now, if they could have came up with some kind of deal to promote Drax and Guardians of the Galaxy, they probably would have loved to have done that. But I'm pretty sure that didn't occur, which is why they probably didn't talk that much about Batista being in Guardians of the Galaxy because they probably weren't going to get paid for it. Same thing with The Mandalorian and Sasha Banks. At least I think that was a Mandalorian. I don't know nothing about Star Wars. But the idea that WWE doesn't want you to become bigger than the brand, silly. Vince told Jesse Ventura in the 80s that that's the way to do it. That's the way you get it done. You go out into Hollywood. You become bigger and better at something else. And then you come back and you can add value to the WWE. And you can bring more fans along with you. It's a win-win situation. The only thing you're missing out on is this guy being on Raw every week or SmackDown. Brock Lesnar, same thing. UFC, a little bit different. Same thing, same concept though. Brock Lesnar went to UFC, became a megastar. Ronda Rousey, same thing. How many examples do you need? How many examples do you really need that Vince does not mind, bringing in people from outside of wrestling? But it's a lot easier when that person is already a wrestler. All right. Like, share, and subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later.
MagMongoSlade.
Best house I ever drew, Daddy.